but there's the concept of resistance, being resistant to change. But the word resistance is not like the best word, kind of negative. So if anybody has like a good alternative, let me know.
Resistance is a great word, the World War II, the resistance was a good word. So
okay.
Anyway,
we see the screen now. Thank you, Chalo.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's fairly light agenda today. Basically, we have two main items to cover. We don't have any external speakers, but I think the two materials it's going to give us some good sort of a context of what we are trying to do in the next few sessions. So yeah, the first one is just a recap of previous meeting. I mean, as those who attended last meeting, we had Eric to present on the team energy work, which was great. So I mean, the next step is we're trying to see if we can align that output or outcome from that work into our sort of a life cycle costing model, which should include the energy being one of the main costing components. I mean, that's basically the first item. Anyone else has any sort of recap of the first meeting? We already spent 11 minutes of the hour. So if none, then I can move to the next item. Yeah, I see Mert nodding.
Let's move. I think we all were there.
Yeah. So Cello, if you make the PowerPoint slide, yeah, thank you. So this is the item around the lifecycle costing business process. So when we had an internal discussion with the core group, I think it was sort of Scott suggested this idea to really see the entire sort of front to the end process of what it takes to do this analysis and what's the outcome of the analysis, intended outcome at least. So I mean, I have sort of 4 phases at the bottom. Sorry, I couldn't see the whole screen. So I'm just going to use my screen to see the slide. So yeah, first phase is the system setup, including data structure. We're talking, selecting the computerized maintenance management systems. And actually, we're going through that process right now. We have the existing CMMS that we're reviewing the full potential of that software and whether it can deliver our business properly. And of course, we need to, once the selection is done, we need to implement it with a data structure, like the hierarchy and the asset naming and what so on, right? And then we're going to start sort of collecting as a data entered in the system and have some sort of a continuous improvement program going, because you're never going to get 100% accurate data in the systems. So that's basically the first phase. The second phase, we're going into the work management and data collection. And of course, the work management includes how to plan your, the condition assessment work, other PMs, and how to execute it, which is one of the big pain points in our organization, for example. And we're sort of managing, multiple different Excel tool that does this planning for different business units. And then, we want to collect the O&M cost over asset life. So Mert and I presented on the work order side of things, whether that's part of preventive maintenance or corrective, reactive, and other sort of operations related work orders. And then the third step within the second phase is the update, decay curve, because that obviously plays a big role. And I think Mert will go over that template that is sort of driven by a couple decay curves that he was able to identify. So that's the second phase. The third phase is the data analysis and modeling. Analyze the cost data, develop a lifecycle costing model. That's really sort of one of the most important outputs, or the ultimate output of this work. And last step is really that will inform the decision support, like the business casing investment planning and whatnot. So to me, this sort of a process mapping serve two goals. One is to invite the utility partners in the call to speak to any of these sort of the process or the steps that your utility is going through, and maybe the lessons learned can help other utilities who's planning or going through the similar process. The second objective, of course, is to map this process and document it per BPMN 2.0. Michael can support us to do that, to really create artifacts around this work that will accompany it by the template that Mert will show, and other sort of case studies from each utilities. So that's basically the overview of this business model, high level business model for life cycle costing. So I mean, I would like to hear any sort of feedback. Did we miss any key steps in the journey? And any other sort of volunteers who can speak to say, hey, we're currently collecting the O&M cost over asset life, and you can share some of the materials. Or if you have CMMS recently selected, or being selected, you can share that experience, and on any other steps along this journey that will really help Mert and I, and also the other utility partners here.
This is Noemi. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry.
This is Noemi Revilla from San Francisco PUC. I have a question. I mean, last year I worked on what we call the tactical asset management plan, which is actually like the asset management plan for treatment facilities. We have collection system developing their own. So one of the things that and this is not the first one we have done. I based the document on a couple of previous documents that we had, but like the later part of the data analysis and modeling and all that decision support was not only based. I mean, it is easy to base all the the decisions on costs, right? Because it's very simple. It's just one data point, basically, right, for each facet. But we also have, I haven't struggled a lot with this, but we also have information, which we haven't updated yet, but about risk, right? So you not only decide on the life cycle cost or the cost of each asset, but what is most important. And I don't see it here. Maybe it is in one of these little boxes here, but I don't see it in here.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, this definitely is just one of the many inputs into the decision support. But because of the context of developing lifecycle costing model, I just want to highlight that this is one of the information that we need to make our decision based off of, right? But as you mentioned, we need to know the risk of service risk of each asset, and for us, service risk can include growth planning, right? So we do look at growth planning, like a master planning, based on I think Vancouver is a highly growing region, and we often have to upsize our pipes, and that sort of drive some of the large investment decisions. And when we do that, we kind of look at condition of the pipes in conjunction with other master planning materials, so that we can optimize the priority of different investment work. So yeah, for sure, I can definitely agree with you that this is just one of the many streams that's going to inform the last step there.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's an input into the last step, along with perhaps like the more simpler things, even like imminent failure mode timing, the dominant failure mode information, the risk, the curve, like the change in risk over time. And I was just going to add one more thing, and I was going to mention this when I talk about the tool anyway, but I haven't done it yet really, but it's not actually that inconceivable to look at the cumulative life cycle cost accumulation to date, and then like the projected increase of that cumulative life cycle cost over the remaining service life of the asset, and then also plotting the a monetized risk along with that at the same time, sort of to see like that cumulative increase cost is like buying you like a reduction in risk, and it's buying you a certain amount of reduction in risk depending on your intervention point. So it's almost starts, it's the beginning of a optimized decision making discussion really into decision support. So we could talk about it too, maybe with some of those charts I'm going to display in mind. It's an excellent point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, in the next revision of this map, I can include those aspects.
Inputs like coming in.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Any other feedback?
I mean, I one quick. This is a comment, not a question at all. But I felt a little over when I was developing or writing the asset management plan. None of the data that we were supposed, to make decisions, right? Like what you're mentioning, like the asset condition assessment and the risk value or the criticality or wherever the redundancy, that has not been done. So we have a lot of data in our CMMS, but it's very old data. And to your point, if you simplify it, like you're saying, right? Like you say, well, okay, you say that your risk based on the years you have the thing, if you have it correctly, of course, and the cost, and you can tie one thing to the other, and then that's it. You have all this information to make the decision a lot simpler. But I don't know. I mean,
so when we develop asset management plans internally, and we like everyone we look at, obviously some of them are kind of old, so the data we have is old in the first place, or secondly, we just don't have the data,
right.
Period. We just don't have it. So we kind of like, depending on like, if it is like what I call like a primary or secondary type of data, like that minimum data set you need to be able to actually generate the components of an asset management plan, at least at a minimum. Even like with a lower confidence rating perhaps, but at least that minimum stuff, like we actually take a stop and then we develop those before proceeding, with the understanding that, hey, these tertiary sources of data, like, maintenance life cycle cost over time, for example, would make the confidence level even better, like at the next opportunity we have to update this document. So we actually, like some of our amps take like over a year to develop, because we need to assign consequence of failure score to everything. We need to assign a developer replacement cost for every entry in the system, sort of thing. So that's how we handle it. Obviously, if schedule is a concern and you need to get something out at like even a lower confidence level, then you just need to sort of really power through it, but really caveat, like a lot of warnings around like that, like what you can do with the output of that document.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did at Metro as well. We recently produced sort of a simplified version of an AMP. We call it a state of the assets report. And in there, we try to summarize the inventory, the replacement value, and the condition data. But as Naomi mentioned, that we have a ton of missing and obsolete data that we had to work with. But the moral of the story was, as long as we sort of document that with the data quality transparently, it has way more value than not producing any document, because we're waiting for the data to be perfect. I mean, you're never going to get to the perfect state of the data quality. So, I mean, to me, asset management is a journey. So, I mean, as you produce those documents, you will realize, oh, hey, we have a weakness in this area of the database, and it has to be part of that continuous improvement plan to sort of constantly update and refine the data that you have in the system. So,
Yeah, job security a little bit, and jokingly, but also
Yeah.
So just as just a reality check, I'm sure not everybody in this call has been implementing asset management internally for as long as Portland Water has. So we've been doing this, obviously way before I was here, but since like 2004, basically, people were working on developing asset management plans here. And even us, I came in recently, relatively recently in the utility, employment timeframes. And what 25% of our pipes length and number of records, like asset count wise, there is no install date on them. And that's where we have most of our asset value buried, like 25%, that's a lot of money. So even a 2% improvement in the annual replacement cycle of 25% of our infrastructure is a lot of money. Deferring that 2% replacement by 1 year saves us a huge amount of money on money borrowed interest cost. So, one of the first things we did when we noticed that problem is that, okay, we'll stop development of the asset management plan. And we wrote like a short and sweet, what is machine learning algorithm that looked at, like known install years, like verified known install years, along with other pipe attributes around we've selected. And then we auto assigned estimate, what we call an estimated install year, to the missing assets. And then we uploaded that to a new field in our GIS and CMMS. That was the basis of our asset management plan moving forward, because you can imagine you don't have a condition rating, fine, we'll use age. But if you don't have age on 25% of your assets, what are you going to do? So, these are the sorts of decisions that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And we've been doing it for like over 15 years almost. Anyway, I'm happy to move on to the lifecycle cost tool now, unless there are other comments or questions.
Oh yeah, a quick question, just briefly. Is Vancouver Metro, it's just collection system, or you have a treatment plan as well?
We do have treatment plants as well. We're more of the wholesaler to the region that we collect the sewers in the interceptors and trunks and put it into the treatment plant system, and also provide water in terms of basically I call it a big highways of pipes, and we feed into different municipalities as they consume.
Hey Chris, don't you do some sort of like a municipal waste thing too over there, or am I remembering it wrong?
Yeah, we do have some solid waste function as well, not 100% for the whole region, but yeah, we do have the solid waste. We do have regional park departments. We do have air quality for the region.
Oh wow, cool.
And housing department as well, to provide offerable rental options.
Wow, that's really the full gamut there, man. Good, yeah. Cool. Oh, thank you for pulling this on the screen, Cello, by the way. I'm sorry, I don't mean to rush anybody or jump. Any other questions before we move on?
Well, just one sort of to recap the previous business process map. Are there any sort of volunteers, utilities who are going through one of these steps currently and to share their journey with us?
I just want to mention that what we have been doing for wastewater enterprise in San Francisco for the treatment facility side, I was developing the asset management plan, and I saw one of the first steps is to have your asset data a little more accurate. And I understand it's impossible to get 99%, but we have a kind of a complicated process. We have different kind of groups we work together, but it has been kind of a journey, and we are closer to being, having all the procedures and all those things kind of laid down and kind of communicated, because communication is very important. But now we are finding that because we have these many steps and kind of two different databases, then they don't match, right? And then sometimes there are things in one database and not in the other. Sometimes in the field are things are not in none of those databases. So and then we have like a smart system for naming our assets. So we're in that process.
Oh wow, nice. Is that something that you can share with us?
Sure, that would be great. I mean, I would love to have some feedback from this group for sure.
Yeah. Interesting, because we do maintain naming standards and the process of updating that as well. So it'll be awesome to hear from you. So I see Scott. Scott has a hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say almost that very thing. It would be nice if Noemi could share with the team overall on that aspect, and also maybe at a later meeting on how they are handling risk, because you were going to be updating this process diagram to include risk as an element, and that's something this team has discussed some. So I just throw that out there for future meetings, which was another agenda item kind of. But also Ben is on the phone, Casey and some others, but Ben, you're involved in replacing and selecting a CMMS system, and so I know Deb was on one of the earlier calls where it was possibly the process that you're using to select CMMS might be something that could be the business process could be quickly mapped, and then you could share that as well.
Yeah, potentially, and also one of the things. Excuse me. One of the things we're looking at quite closely, and I know some of the other utilities are making transitions from one system to the other. Is with that data quality, how much of that old data do you bring across? How much do you rely on that data? Where do you? Because in some senses, is it better to make a clean start with a known point, but then you do lose something by not bringing that old data across. But then some of that data, is not going to help you too much. So one of the things we're looking at is actually the process of understanding what data it is that we want to bring across, and the protocols that go along with that, so that we can bring the right data across with us when we make that transition.
So I can tell you that we are now in the process of transitioning from Oracle WAM into Infor Public Sector. And we are identifying the, basically we are migrating a substantial percent of our former data into the new system. And that actually involves looking at our current standards and our drop-down lists, for example, for failure modes, like we are going into that level. And then we are updating them. Because, hey, you know what, this doesn't make as much sense. We've had a lot of, similar, entries, but spelled differently a little bit, not wrong, spelled just differently. And we are not really consolidating the same failure mode, for example. So we are actually mapping all those either to one to consolidate, or sometimes coming up with new ones to, 2 or 3 things basically map into that one for the transition. So we are doing a full-on configuration because we actually do have relative trust in the data we've put in the system since about 2010, 2011. So we don't want to lose that. So we are actually going, we're actually spending a lot of bandwidth to carry those with us going forward. I've seen it done once, Ben, where all that old data from the old system was basically converted into some sort of a string on a per asset basis. Basically concatenate all the field names and the field entries in this one big memo strength, not even a 256 character text, it's memo. And then that actually is added so that it's at least searchable to the asset, for a historical transfer, which is, one thing I'll tell you is that, you can't really do much with that. That is not in any way, obviously, actionable data. You can read it. But it's very difficult to read. It's not formatted right. Everything is this one big memo cell. But that's one extreme end of let's call it a bad practice, for the lack of, forgive my English sophistication there, bad practice versus a best practice. which is like basically remapping everything down to field.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's interesting.
So before we go to the next thing, any other, when I look at the slide that Chris has, and I like it very much, what would be marvelous, each one of these things is actually a collapsed process. If we could document, if a utility could find that some of these things are meaningful for them today, and then actually look at the model and develop a process model and describe the systems, I think it would benefit them and also everybody else. Just a thought. I think this is a very good high level value chain that just to put a sort of a suggestion across like that. So did you want me to move to the spreadsheet?
Sure, let's do that. Thank you, Cello. And thank you for the share button is still offline for me. I'm guessing you couldn't find a way to make me a co-presenter or a host.
I have no idea because they just fixed one problem for me. You could see on my, when I was sharing the screen, you could see that Microsoft was calling me on the phone. Yeah, it's anyway.
Yeah, by the way, on a side note, I also just realized that I cannot even like send a chat message to the meeting because like it's forbidden for me to do that now too. So some settings changed.
This is bizarre. This is bizarre.
I used to be able to do so. So what happens if you click to the ellipsis next to my name, Cello? Do you have like
let me see.
Do you have a feature that says co-presenter or make presenter or make host or something?
Okay, let me just see. Okay, how about this?
Yes, I'm a presenter. I can now share content. Cool.
Okay.
So let me do that. Let me share and then I can go over the file together with you all. So let me open it up. Okay, is this coming okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna go back to Teams here as well. Great. So I'm gonna start actually here real quick. So just to give everybody a little background, it's gonna take a minute. I think most of you were there for that, but you know, in the beginning, you know, we selected a process to sort of develop a, you know, like a more detailed like sub-process around. You know, we had a, you know, develop asset costing in the asset management plan overall workflow. And then we chose to dig a little deeper into the development of the asset lifecycle costs. And then we prepared a little, let's call it like a scope or an approach document where we identified the lifecycle components. And then, you know, there we said something like, oh, well, why don't we pick like one or two asset types and then sort of use them as almost like a case study input, you know, material to see if we can actually go back to our utilities, dig some data up, and then, you know, basically as we type our sort of cases at the end of this phase of WISE, just say, hey, you know what, we decided to dig deeper into the lifecycle costs. We developed an approach document, you know, here it is. These are the lifecycle cost components we wanted to look at. But, you know, utilities are at different maturity in terms of the data they have, in terms of quantity and quality, like completeness and accuracy and stuff like that. So let's see, you know, what we could do as a little case study with kind of like a quick back of the envelope lifecycle cost model that can be implemented in a more sophisticated tool or, you know, some sort of software, obviously later within each respective utility. So the lifecycle tool that I'm sharing now is basically kind of like a, you know, something that like, you know, it's a tool, software, like a tool to sort of facilitate that discussion into the case that we are going to have to write. So what you see here is basically a setup for like one asset, which can be replicated as a logic with some, use of some computers for like, all of the assets that, we want to apply it to in our system. By the way, everybody's camera is off. I'm not getting any feedback. So can somebody just verify I'm coming across okay and you can see the screen? Okay, thank you, Casey. Great. So I set this up, and then I had a chance to at least briefly discuss it with Chris, Scott, and Cello. They provided me some important feedback. I did my best to incorporate it all. So now I'm gonna just describe the process to you, what we are trying to do with this. And then we'll discuss sort of like what we can sort of use this going forward a little bit more. So pretty straightforward for any given asset. I just pick kind of like these are all dummy numbers. I threw in like a, replacement value of $56,000. And then I wanted to set this up so that it looks at historic data, like actual data that if we have it, in the system. And then, of course, today, let's say in 2022, up to that point, and then, of course, projected based on some assumptions going into the future as well to help with that, decision-making part on when to replace, when to do what sort of discussion, a little bit on, what Noemi brought up in terms of risk, but also other inputs too. So what you see here is basically just year over time. You see the condition, a condition change over time as, of course, the asset ages or gets worked on, gets some improvements or so forth. Let's see, I forgot I had some notes here. Let's see. So condition change over time here it's difficult to read, in shared screen. The font is small on the comment, so I'll read it. Condition change over time could depend on field measurements such as run hours and start-stop cycles. If you may recall that we chose like a pump and a pump motor as kind of like a common asset between water and wastewater side that we all have like a lot of in our inventories. So run hours and start-stop cycles generally can be used as like a proxy condition ratings if you have sort of historic data over like when things trip. Or at the same time, you can just also have some sort of like a life expectancy. This thing is going to last 40 years. Today it's 1, in 40 years it's 5, and it will get some rehabs along the way. So you can have some sort of like a projected condition profile over time as well. You could also do that. But the point being, there's a year, and then there's a corresponding condition rating that you do either age-based or you actually go measure it in the field somehow. And then we start doing some calculations here already. So there is a formula here that you're going to notice that is looking at the condition rating assigned to an asset and then tries to do an estimation on, okay, so given that condition, like what's the % life consumed at that point in time for the asset? And that comes from the decay curves that I'm going to share with you in a little while. So if you remember in our approach document on lifecycle costing, we talked about assigning some sort of standard decay curves around asset types, perhaps, civil, mechanical, whatever, or pump, or, HVAC or whatever, things like that. So that basically comes from there. Which we will visit in just a minute or two. And the rest of this is basically, this is just simple math on, these are the life cycle components across the top here. We can add or remove, like each utility can add to them if they have a life cycle component that they don't see here. Or we can remove something if it's not applicable to your utility, obviously. But it's set up so that this just adds them up. This is just the cumulative over time. And then what this shows is then some of the renewal related lifecycle costs. It could be like acquisition, rehab, replacement, or disposal costs that you incur. And then some operation related. Oh, it's snowing again in Portland. Cool. All right. So operation related costs. You could have like a operation specific labor on some of your assets, maybe not, if it doesn't apply, just skip it. Over time, if you have to like pay somebody to operate it for you, third-party costs, power expenditure over time on a per year basis, and anything else that kind of like a catch-all. And now we have maintenance-related expenses, which are more applicable probably than operations-related costs. Maintenance-related costs are often tracked more accurately than operations-related costs anyway. But you can have sort of preventive, corrective, and predictive maintenance costs listed here. They could be, like represented as adding labor, equipment, and material for that preventive maintenance activity for that whole year for that asset together. Or you could choose to track those three components separately, but I figure for discussion purposes, this is more than enough. But we still wanted to separate preventive, corrective, and predictive, because not every asset will have predictive maintenance activities, and it will be good to show that separately. Generally, predictive maintenance is an investment that buys you something in return. It buys you renewable deferral. It buys you reduced preventive maintenance dollars as well. So it's good to sort of see that separately and compare that component as an investment to what you get out of it. And we also, of course, separated preventative and corrective because, generally speaking, preventive maintenance may be based on some sort of like a run hour or like, time base, like every year we're going to do XYZ, or every, 5,000 hours we're going to do this. And that has like an average annual impact you could reflect in a tool like this. On average, if we are replacing the belt every 5,000, hours, and every year we run it for 10,000 hours. So we replace the belt twice a year. So that's the cost for that activity, for example. I'm sorry if I'm being too technical. Somebody just, raise your hand and tell me if it's too detailed. But the point is that we can break down these this way. So these are the components. So next, let's take a quick look at the curves that this setup uses for tracking maintenance cost, change over asset life, and how the condition of an asset changes over its life. So let's start with the condition profiles first. So we actually have curves at Portland Water we use in our decision support system. So this was relatively straightforward for me. So I basically just went into our decision support system tool and then got our very simple formula for assigning a condition curve to our assets. So it looks, you can look at the numbers if you're really in love with numbers, but the image is prettier. So let's focus on that. So what you see here is an asset's condition represented on the primary y-axis on the left. Condition 1, our terminology is that condition 1 is new, condition 5 is not, like, time to replace sort of thing. So that's there on the left. And then at the top, you see like an asset's life consumed, represented as a percentage. It's a percentage because, like a pump may last 40 years, but we want these curves to be applicable to, let's say, like HVAC system, or like a, roof or something. Obviously, they have different lives. So it's best to represent that as a percent life consumed. Then we can just merge that with the useful life later. But we represent it this way. So, and then there are different shape factors, meaning like, yes, the asset is going to last, both of these assets are going to last 40 years. It's just that, their performance, their condition profile will differ, like how they get from that year 1 to year 40. And that is important because, if they maintain kind of like a high enough, like good performance for a longer period of their life cycle, you may not be incurring a lot of sort of maintenance costs for that, at least in that beginning. But towards the end of their life cycle, perhaps they will start incurring some more maintenance cost. Or once they hit once an asset that follows a shape factor of 4, generally think about it as like a building superstructure or some sort of like concrete treatment tank. If it's going to maintain that, condition 2 for most of its life, like, 70% of its like a useful life, actually it looks fine, it's in good condition. But once you start sort of chipping away at the concrete and then those freeze-thaw cycles hit, the water starts finding more ways into it, corroding the rebars or expanding and chipping away the concrete even more through the freeze-thaw cycles, that rate of decay is going to increase. So, you know, like what that means is that once an asset like that reaches a condition of 4, like remaining useful life before it just crumbles down is like, you know, maybe roughly 7% of its life, right? So if that tank is going to last you 80 years, 7% of that is 60 years. So you basically have 6 years to get that thing renewed. So you may want to, prioritize your investment with that in mind. I don't know about you all, but in our case, it takes us, like a good 6 years before we could, put something in the budget the following year and start working on the planning, design, and the construction. Well, there are other assets where they follow a more linear decay profile, and they hit a condition of 4 here in this case. That means that they only have used about 76-75% of its life. So if that asset has like a life expectancy of 40 years, there's still 10 years there. So we have a little bit more time. We don't have to like rush it as much as the other one. So that's important from that perspective. Anyway, so what you see here are basically different shape factors. So each asset that you look at, it could be an asset type or an asset category. Category like mechanical versus structural, or type versus, like pump versus like a compressor or something. So they will have like you can assign a standard shape factor to it. If you have failure data or condition data that you measure in the field over time, then you could actually plot that for yourself. But if you don't have it, you can choose one of these shape factors as a starting point. Anyway, so that's what this is. So I'm going to take a breather here. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'm going to just ask any questions so far before we move on to the maintenance items.
Yeah, this is Nami. So where do you get this different what's these curves develop in your kind of agency, or do you get it somewhere where there are standard curves that you take?
Yeah, good question. So we developed our own, and then we used it to implement in our decision support system, Noemi. So our standards are: the first one is civil structural, mechanical, electrical, instrumentation, and even though we don't actually use it, we went with the first one, but this was developed initially for our groundwater wells. Because, wells once developed are not clogged yet as much. There's not a lot of, biofilm formation or, mineral accumulation. So they work pretty well at first, but their condition decays quickly, and it reaches a little bit of like a recharge equilibrium for a while. So it follows that. So yeah, so we developed these. I'm very happy to share these with fellow utilities if you need. So I can send this out and you can use it for yourself. I had curves from my previous employer, but of course, that's private company and intellectual property reasons. I didn't take any of that stuff with me when I left, which was the right thing to do. So, but if you do work with consultants, they may have these in their portfolio as well. I have seen some consultants somehow access the curves that we developed in my previous firm from our former clients, and they were using them on their project. So I'm sure they are around somewhere. Yeah. So that's any other questions?
Mert, can you remind me what those 4 represent? You went through them a minute ago.
Oh, the shape factors? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Casey. Yeah. So think about the outer edge here, the upper right, generally, or like civil and structural type assets. From there, you go to mechanical type assets, the next one down. Next one down is electrical. And the next one down is instrumentation. The logic there is, something like a civil structure, like a concrete tank. Like once it's built, like it's going to last a while, like a building is going to last a while before it starts showing signs of decay. Like in theory, assuming your construction management, everything was well done. But once decay starts, the rate of decay will increase over time. And you can also think about the more linear decline, like a shape factor of 1, for example, also be indicative of, hey, you know what, the failure pattern here is a little random. Like generally instrumentation is instrumentation assets is a good example. Like some of them will last you as long as they get obsolete, like until they get obsolete, and they will still work in theory. And others will basically like randomly fail. Like it's random in that like you couldn't really figure out the root cause of failure on those. Like it's just like fried. So generally more random failure events like instrumentation or electrical, they will be closer to that linear decay. Like think about it more like frankly, just an age-based decay because you just don't know any better. And then like, like sort of like your groundwater wells or any asset that actually starts operating really well, decays fast soon after operation and then settles into more of a steady state until it slowly loses its performance over time, is like that 0.5, like a well. So civil, mechanical, electrical, instrumentation, and then specific cases such as wells at the.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah.
Sure. All right. So but this is again, so this is only the relationship between like, condition today versus how we project it to change in the future once we measure the condition today. If somebody measures a condition of a concrete tank and then tells me it's 3 today, like I'm kind of alarmed in terms of the urgency the need to intervene, versus if somebody measures the condition of a pump as a 3, like I'm really not like as alarmed, just because there is a little bit more time there to absorb things and deal with it. So this is that condition versus useful life consumed side. Now, let's talk about maintenance real quick, and we are running out of time, so we're going to have to pick this up next time around. And these curves we actually did not have in-house, so I had to just whip these up, and they don't really fully reflect what I had in mind, but this is what I was able to do in the little time I had. I'm gonna, ask you if you have better curves or if you have some ideas on how to make these better, just reach out to us. What this shows here is that as the asset's condition changes over time, 1 through 5, again, 1 is new sort of thing. We are representing the maintenance cost as a percentage of the asset's replacement value. So this could be preventive maintenance or corrective maintenance. So you can pick a different shape factor for each of those categories. What you see here is, again, changing condition and how does the maintenance cost over time increase as the asset gets older. I wanted to do kind of like actually a more of a bathtub curve here, where it kind of maybe starts high and then goes down a little bit to like settles into a steady state maintenance expense, and then it increases as the asset gets old. I couldn't figure it out, but if people are better at math than I am, you can do it maybe. So I'm going to take a break here because I think Cello is going to ask us to wrap up. Go ahead, Cello.
Yeah, I thought, could you go just to the previous chart that you had, the curves?
This one here?
Yeah, I think that one interesting thing is that the horizontal axis is percent life consumed.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of my time building control systems, and so you're right. But the life itself is significantly different. The expected life is very different for, let's say, something that has electronics and automatic control and processors and stuff like that versus a pump, a mechanical device. So would it be helpful to also combine, have something in addition to having a relative time, to also have the combine it with the life itself, to have it in absolute terms? You know what I mean? To generate a table different using the expected life. Am I making any sense to you?
You are, except all what I'm gonna say is, if you don't mind, I actually have a meeting starting right now.
Okay,
Anyway,
okay.
so
Sorry about that.
this
Sorry
is
about that.
becomes, yeah, I didn't do a good job timing this, but we could pick it up from there next time we
Okay.
meet, and then I can finish describing the rest of this lifecycle tool to everybody
Okay.
for their feedback.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't watch the time, so.
No, I mean neither. Yeah, and it took us a little longer to get to starting discussing it, but